Mizzou announces the Tigers will not host a spring game. They join the likes of the Texas Longhorns. But why? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, the big news that came out yesterday, we heard about a week ago that Texas had decided they were not going to have a spring game this year for various reasons. And now we hear Mizzou will not have a spring game this year. In fact, not this year or next year either. So join us to talk all about it is our buddy John Miller, host of Locked On Mizzou. John, welcome in, man. On a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked are you to hear Eli Drinkwitz and Mizzou not going to have a spring game?
Can I say 0? Because I think I'm about there. I mean, it just seems like part of a new trend here of, let's be real, college football coaches are just absolute control freaks. And while the official reason that Missouri put out is legitimate to some extent, hey, there is some major construction happening at Memorial Stadium here in 25 and 26, but apparently not enough for them to move the season next year, cancel, any other games, any regular season games. So to be honest with you, I don't buy that explanation. I think the real explanation is quite simply just control. These coaches with a spring portal window, I mean, it's been basically said openly by like Matt Rule at Nebraska, they just don't want to put out any information out there that they have to. So this is just all a control thing. And frankly, I'm not surprised at all. I think I think it's especially not surprising that Missouri kind of used a convenient excuse, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it, but according to the press release from the school, decision was made due to ongoing construction and renovation at Memorial Stadium. We know that's going on, but they did also announce, unfortunately, all of Mizzou's practices will also be closed to the public as well. I do think it is kind of doing a little bit of disservice to your fan base, right? I mean, Drink wants to get everybody fired up and excited about Mizzou football and, come out and pack the stadium and all this, but hey, for spring ball, we're going to close practices and nobody's allowed in to see what's going on. I assume media will be, but it's just a little bit, I don't want to say slap in the face because that's extreme, but do some kind of event. I mean, even Ole Miss last year did a tug of war and hot dog eating contest with the players for the fans.
Sure, and I could see Missouri doing something like that. I really could. That wouldn't surprise me at all if they eventually announce some kind of fan day in the spring, and that would be nice. But again, it's just not going to draw the same kind of crowd. And really, at this point, like you say, I mean, it's spring practice, have some kind of open scrimmage. Maybe they will at some point, but like we've seen over and over again here in college football lately, the trend is less and less access for the fans and especially the media. So I don't think any of us can be surprised by this move. It's just another step in this pattern.
And to your point, Steve Sarkisian said they're going to go more the NFL model, focus on conditioning and that sort of thing. Chris Del Conte, the Longhorns AD, told ESPN that he said the changing schedule of college football called for a change in how they look at spring football. And then USC even said that they said the financial resources spent on the spring game could be better spent elsewhere. And of course, Matt Rule had the stupid other teams are going to come poach my players approach,
right.
But I do wonder how much of this is new quarterback. And this kind of transitions us into a little bit of a Mizzou spring preview, which you've kind of been going around. We did our Alabama preview last week. We'll do a Tennessee preview this week. So while we got John Miller, we'll do a little Mizzou preview as well. Beau Pribula coming in from Penn State. I wonder if some of this is a little gamesmanship on Eli Drinkwitz's part saying, I don't want you guys to see my quarterback competition.
I think you're on to something there for sure. I think you're absolutely on to something. Again, especially the control freak nature of Eli Drinkwitz. He's very much into all this stuff, sort of your relatively new age guy, about 42 years old. He's all about the control too. So yeah, I think Pribula, an interesting piece who's played a little bit for Penn State, but aside from, I believe, just one half against Wisconsin, a pretty impressive half, but I don't think he ever started a game for Penn State. So I think there's at least an argument to be made there. There could be some value for Missouri and hiding Pribula away, but I got to be honest, I think that stuff's pretty overrated. I don't know about you, Gordy. When you see what the NFL does, they allow so much more access than college football. I don't know that anybody really argues that changes the results a ton over a season, but that's just me.
Well, it does feel like, too, we've kind of moved away from that. Like, that used to be the biggest thing in college football for years. Like, we'd go into the opener with teams having not announced a starting quarterback. Yeah, I feel like last year we kind of got away from that. Like, teams, you kind of know now, right? I mean, specifically in the SEC this year, like, majority of people, we know who the quarterbacks are. I mean, I know it's the end of February, John, but, like, to put a percentage chance on it, could Sam Horn or Drew Pine beat out Beau Pribula? I mean, there's a reason why you went paid good money to go get Beau from Penn State.
That's exactly right, and I think that is kind of the interesting thing about the portal is since we all have access to this information, we can see who Missouri is after, who everybody in the nation is after in terms of visits and all that stuff. It's not hard to connect the dots here and go, oh, yeah, I think Beau Pribula's probably got a 95% chance to start because – well, Sam Horn is, I do believe, absolutely, if he's beating out Beau Pribula, Missouri will start Sam Horn. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they're going to take the guy who's making more money and just force him out there. But, yeah, obviously, they didn't pay him. At the same time, they're not paying him over $1 million to sit on the bench.
A couple quick hitters here, just roster-wise. You lose Luther Burden. Who's going to be that next guy to step up? I know Marquise Johnson is there, Joshua Manning. Kevin Coleman, the big wide receiver from Mississippi State coming in through the portal. Is there an heir apparent there?
Well, specifically, I think in Burden's spot in the slot, it is going to be Kevin Coleman from Mississippi State. I think his production, I don't want to say I'm just totally assuming it, but more so than the other Missouri receivers. We've seen some real flashes from Marquise Johnson over the last couple seasons. He looked really good in 2023. He also maybe didn't quite live up to what we wanted this year just in terms of stats, overall stat production. But he was really impressive in the bowl game. That was a good sign. Josh Manning is really, who you brought up, is really the guy. If he takes a big step forward next season, that's going to be huge for the Missouri offense.
Yeah, and obviously Brett Norfleet at tight end is a nice
Mm-hmm.
weapon. How about in the backfield? Eli's had his fair share of good running backs, and Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll both head off to the NFL draft, but they bring in Ahmad Hardy from Louisiana Monroe, I believe, and then you have Jamal Roberts. I mean, it just feels like every year the one constant is Drinkwitz is always going to have a good run game.
Yeah, I think he's found another good one in Hardy. I really do, just based on what I've seen from him. I'm not terribly worried about the jump from the Louisiana Monroe level, obviously, to the SEC level. I just am impressed by his tape. I think he's a really explosive player, and while running back isn't necessarily the most important position on the field, I think it's one of the most fun positions on the field, and certainly I think he's going to have 1,000-yard season. Assuming health, I think he's a 1,000-yard rusher for Missouri next season.
Over on the defensive side, a lot of reason to get excited about a lot of guys. Zion Young, Chris McClellan, Drayden Norwood, I think is going to be the next big, great DB to come out of Mizzou, but you got to like what they did in the portal, and getting Damon Wilson from Georgia seems to be the big one.
Indeed. In fact, our colleague Brian Smith, who's the host of the new Portal podcast, just absolutely loves Damon Wilson. He thinks he's the best player in the entire portal, quite possibly. And you know what? I've seen some other writers online who have him top 5. So, I mean, he's a heck of an addition, and kind of nice that Missouri's taking him away from Georgia, even though they aren't actually an opponent this season.
Yeah, and another guy who's, look, if he could stay healthy, it's a great leader to have, but Jalen Catalon, man, is on like his 8th school. I mean, we had Jalen on Locked On SEC years ago when he was at Arkansas. He played at Texas. He played at UNLV, and now he's coming to Mizzou. And yes, injury's been a big part of his career, but if he could stay healthy, that's a nice veteran leader to have back there.
Indeed, and the good news for Missouri is he wasn't the only guy that they got at safety, so I think Missouri is aware of that injury history as anybody. It seems like they at least have one backup plan there, but obviously, like you say, if he can just stay on the field, I think you're right. I think he'll be a huge plus for the Tigers.
Last thing for you, John. Okay, we won't get a spring game to watch with Mizzou, but what's the biggest question that Mizzou needs to answer coming out of this spring?
Well, the quarterback's the obvious one, but I think really offensive line is every bit as important. Unlike the last offseason where Missouri basically had its entire offense coming back and a lot of new faces on defense, it's really the exact opposite this season. So I think if I'm being completely honest, if I'm going to pick Missouri to have, another 10-win season, I'd love to see us get 3 in a row. We've had 1 in 23 and 1 in 24. I'd say it's more likely in 26. Quite simply, Pribula, I like his upside, but I wish he had a little bit more experience. I just think in the receivers, the offensive line, it's just a lot of new faces for me to just be over the top bullish on Missouri. Hope I'm wrong, of course. I think they'll still be a solid team, but like I said, offensive line, I think if that can come together, well, then I could be completely wrong. Then maybe Missouri will surprise next year.
There you have it. The Mizzou Tigers, they hit the practice field this Friday, but we will not get eyeballs on them. No spring game this year, so we'll have to guess. But, of course, John Miller will keep us all up to date over there on Locked On Mizzou. John, good to talk with you, man. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Gordy.
All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We got some news and nuggets we will get to, some football news, some basketball news, all that coming your way here in just a second. But first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode brought to you by friends at PrizePicks, and March basketball is here. There's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. And with PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. Of course, building lineups is a great way to get it started. It's quick and easy. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. And of course, when you win, your money will hit your account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around with those fast payouts. Go download the PrizePicks app today and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege. Get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And again, it is the PrizePicks app. With PrizePicks, you can run your game. Go download PrizePicks today. All right, run along here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And we give you the news there about Mizzou not having their spring game. We got some other nuggets we're going to get to, so let's do it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch! Around the conference.
And we stop over at Florida as Billy Napier's filled an opening on his on-field coaching staff. Florida officially announcing the addition of Deron Wilson as the Gators' new defensive backs coach. He joins after the departure of secondary coach Will Harris. Wilson returns to Florida after 2 seasons at Arkansas. In January, he had been named defensive coordinator at Georgia State. But a little bit of a pivot. Billy Napier saying in a statement, "It's great to have Deron back in the building. His exposure to our system, tree of coaches to go along with experience in the SEC makes his hiring a no-brainer." Wilson was on Napier's staff in 2022 as a quality control assistant working with the DBs. Vinny Sunseri will hold the title of co-DC and safeties coach, and Wilson will focus on the Florida cornerbacks. Wilson said in a statement, "It's an honor to rejoin the Florida football staff. I'm inspired by the culture Coach Napier is building." Under Wilson, the Arkansas secondary showed notable improvement in 2023. They ranked 4th in the SEC in passing yards allowed per game that season. So we'll see if he can build off of that. Meanwhile, over at Texas, they had one of the best defensive units in the country last year. The Longhorns get to the college football playoff semifinals under Steve Sarkisian, and they're losing a key piece. According to NFL insider Tom Pelissero, secondary coach Terry Joseph going to make the jump to the NFL's defensive passing game coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. He's the cousin of longtime NFL coach and assistant Vance Joseph, but this Joseph spent 2018 through 2020 with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, joined Sark's first staff at Texas as the defensive passing game coordinator and secondary coach. He did help coach and develop Jahdae Barron, who won the Jim Thorpe Award and was considered the top defensive back in college football. But Terry Joseph has had various stints throughout the SEC as a GA at LSU, DB's coach at Tennessee, Texas A&M. This past season, the Longhorn defense finished third nationally in points allowed per game at 15.3. Only Ohio State and Ole Miss fared better than that this season. So good pedigree there, and big loss there for Texas. We'll keep an eye on who they will hire to replace him to coach their secondary. In SEC Hoops news, they have announced their players of the week for the week of February 24th. And on Monday, put out the honorees, two standouts being recognized as players of the week: Alabama's Mark Sears and Tennessee's Chaz Lanier. Oklahoma's Jeremiah Fears was named freshman of the week. But Mark Sears, sensational week for Alabama against Mizzou and Kentucky. He averaged 32 points, 4.5 assists, 3 rebounds, and a steal. He scored his total 65 points in the week on 37 field goal attempts, shooting 54%. He had 35 in Alabama's loss to Mizzou, followed it up with 30 points in the win over Kentucky. He's the first Division I player this season to have back-to-back games of 30-plus points, and just the second player to do so in the last 20 years. So pretty good stuff there. Meanwhile, Lanier over for the Vols. He had only one game last week, but the fifth-year senior logged 30 points and 5 rebounds in Tennessee's win at Texas A&M. He's only the second player in the last 20 years to put up 30 points in a road win over an AP top 10 opponent, and the only conference player to do it in league action. He had 8 3-pointers in the game. And, of course, Fears for Oklahoma. They played ranked teams in Florida and Mississippi State last week. Sooners went 1-1, but he was a standout player. He led all scorers with 22 points in a loss to Florida. It hit 4 threes in that game, the tie career high. And then the win over Mississippi State. He became just the second SEC player since 96-97 to have a stat line of at least 27 points, 10 assists, and 5 rebounds in a game. As a freshman, marked the first double-double of his career. So good stuff there. Now, in terms of SEC basketball, Paul Finebaum says SEC hoops, they are entering national championship or bust conversation. Paul Finebaum appearing on McElroy and Kublik in the morning this week and basically talked about it. Look, it is high time with the SEC having their best year in college hoops. It's time to put up or shut up. And here's what Finebaum said. He said there's going to be an unbelievable expectation, and with unbelievable expectations, we can be led to a possible letdown. I almost feel like if the SEC does not win the national championship this year in college basketball, it's going to be considered a disappointment. Nowhere other than perhaps 2015 can you ever make that statement when Kentucky was undefeated and trying to go wire to wire. He said that's how great this league is. I think it's good. Instead of many years past hoping to get 3 or 4 teams into the tournament, we've never been at this precipice before where, 13 teams are projected to get in right now. He said, and quite frankly, no one ever has. I don't want to say it's national championship or bust, but it is about time the SEC won a national championship in basketball, considering it hasn't happened in 12 years. And I tend to agree with Paul. Look, somebody's got to step up. I mean, Final Fours are great, but, it's been since John Calipari and Anthony Davis held that national championship trophy down in New Orleans. Before that, you got to go to the back-to-back teams from Billy Donovan, and that's going on almost 20 years now. So, we've had some Final Four teams. Remember LSU in 06 made it to the Final Four. We've had Auburn knocking on the door. We had Alabama last year. I mean, we've had teams knocking on the door. Arkansas had some great runs. It's time somebody step up. And look, if anybody can do it, it's this Auburn team with Chennai Broome and how great he is. But also keeping, mind, Nate Oates has been really good come tournament time. And that team led by Mark Sears, I mean, they are a contender as well. Florida, what Todd Golden's doing right now, they are incredible. So, look, it could be any number of teams. I think just conference pride on the line. It's the one sport. I'm bringing this up all the time. SC's dominating every sport. College football, maybe not so much the last 2 years, but for the last 20, they've dominated in that. Look at women's basketball. Look at college baseball. It's all the other sports, gymnastics. The SEC's dominated. Oklahoma and softball, welcome to the conference. You got all these other, the smaller sports where the SEC dominates, but men's basketball is the one that they have really not had the postseason success with titles. And so on and so forth. So we will see what the SEC is able to do this NCAA tournament time, but I agree with Paul. Let's put up or shut up time. I mean, look, it'd be great to get, like, it's one thing. What if the SEC gets 3 teams in the Final Four? Feel pretty good about their chances or their odds at that point, but we'll see how the seeding goes. And of course, if Alabama, Auburn, and Florida can all remain 1 seeds, it's a good chance. It's a good chance. Maybe one of those teams, or maybe all 3 of those teams can make it to the Sweet 16. We'll see. All right, still more to come here on Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, we're along here, Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And look, I'm a big draftnik. For those of you out there who get into the NFL draft, always like to see what the SEC guys do. And, I like to see all the SEC guys go in the first round and set records for, most players from a conference drafted and all that kind of stuff. Well, this week is an important week. It is the NFL Combine up in Indianapolis, and it's being reported a few key SEC quarterbacks are preparing to throw for teams on the field in Indianapolis. Now, it sounds like Shedeur Sanders from Colorado is not going to throw, so does that open the door for more attention on the SEC quarterbacks? Like I said, according to the report, Shedeur Sanders not planning to throw at the event and will wait for his pro day. Tom Pelissero reports Miami quarterback Cam Ward is unsure about throwing, but we did hear that Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe and Ole Miss quarterback Jaxson Dart are expected to throw for teams this week in Indianapolis. Former Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard also expected to throw. But Ward is current favorite to be the number 1 pick overall at a couple of sports books out there. Dart is included in the top odds. So some people thinking that maybe Dart and Milroe could both, still fall into the middle to back into the first round if we see this run on quarterbacks. That happens a lot. Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward both expected to go, right now with the top 2 picks. We'll see. But at minimum, it feels like they'll both be gone after the top 5. Somebody take a chance on a Riley Leonard or something like that. But it feels like Milroe, because of his athleticism, and then, of course, Jaxson Dart with all the guards he's thrown for, that they could both be in the mix. But one sports book has Jaxson Dart at plus 5,000 to go number 1 overall. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but of course, he could have a nice day at the combine. But the news on Dart and Milroe, not very surprising. Both, like I said, holding a lot of potential, but need to solidify their status for this draft. Dart did throw for over 10,000 yards in 3 seasons at Ole Miss with 72 touchdowns, completed 69% of his passes this season. And then Milroe, dual threat option, does have some question marks as a passer, but a chance for him to go showcase his arm and his talent, really show what he can do. So it'll be exciting to see. And again, more chances for SEC quarterbacks to go on to the next level and have success. You look at a lot of guys who've had instant success. We've seen, Joe Burrow, when he got to Cincinnati, have pretty instant success. Look at Jaden Daniels and how far he took the Washington Commanders in just year 1 there was pretty darn impressive. Bo Nix, if you still want to claim him as an Auburn SEC guy, had some instant success there with Denver, albeit by route of Oregon, but of course started in the SEC. A lot of good quarterbacks have had some great success immediately. We'll see what happens with Bryce Young in Carolina. Does he turn that thing around? But again, going to be fun to watch the future of Jaxson Dart and Jalen Milroe and where they end up in the draft. All right, quick SEC baseball nugget before we wrap things up today. Some bad news over at Texas A&M as Ryan Brauninger from Tex Ags reporting that third baseman Gavin Grohovic set to have shoulder surgery and will be out the remainder of the season. He's in his 2nd year there, coming off a standout campaign that earned him the title of SEC Freshman of the Year in 2024. Helped take Texas A&M all the way to the College World Series Finals as a 67-game starter. Slashed .298 while recording 23 home runs, a Texas A&M freshman record. and drove in 66 runs batted in. One of those 23 homers was the first ever leadoff home run in the first game of the College World Series final. In addition to his SEC honor, Grahovic was also named a freshman All-American by D1 Baseball, Perfect Game, Baseball America, and the Baseball Writers Association. He made the 2024 USA Baseball Collegiate National Team. Just an incredible baseball player this season in just 6 games played. He was only batting .227, did have 5 hits, 2 home runs, and 6 RBIs, over 22 at-bats, in addition to reaching base 3 times via hit by a pitch and drawing a walk. So just tough news there for the team that is number 1 in the polls right now. And by the way, if you guys missed this, the latest D1 baseball rankings that came out yesterday, check out these rankings. Texas A&M 1, LSU 2, Tennessee 3, Alabama 4. So you got the top 4 teams in the country, all from the SEC. Then they've got Georgia at 6, Florida at 8. So that is 6 of the top 8 teams in the country from the SEC. Then you go down a little bit. We got Vanderbilt at number 14. We've got Texas at number 15. We got Oklahoma at number 16. Then we've got Mississippi State at number 18. That's 10, by the way, if you guys aren't keeping track. And then just one more for good measure, we got Ole Miss coming in at number 24. So I get it. This is just 2 weeks into the baseball season, but pretty damn impressive to have 11 teams ranked in the Division One in the D1 baseball top 25 rankings. Let me just make sure I got that right. A&M 1, LSU 2, Tennessee 3, Bama 4, Georgia at 6, Florida at 8, Vanderbilt at 14, Texas at 15, Oklahoma at 16, Mississippi State at 18, and like we said, Ole Miss coming in at number 24. Just absolutely incredible, and just shows you how deep this conference is. I mean, it's amazing, you know, with football. Like, we need to have some more postseason success in this playoff with football, because the SEC is just dominating all these other sports. And look at the season they're having right now in men's basketball. Look at the season they're having in gymnastics. Look at how they're getting started right now with so many teams ranked on the baseball diamond, softball. We got several SEC teams dominating in that. Of course, Oklahoma's been the behemoth in that sport. Yeah, man, it's incredible to see. So let's hope that SEC baseball, when we get into those games, SEC conference play in a couple of weeks, it's going to be a lot of fun watching these Friday and Saturday night games. We're going to have studs on the mound, big time hitters. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm a big SEC baseball fan, but just a loaded conference again in men's basketball this year, and now in baseball. See if football can turn this thing around come fall time. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Our thanks to John Miller for giving us a little bit of a Mizzou preview. And come on back tomorrow on the show. We're going to be talking, we'll do a Tennessee preview with our buddy Eric Kane. You don't want to miss that. And hey, for your second listen, you could check out any of our other great podcasts. You can check out John Miller, who does Locked On Mizzou, wherever you get your podcasts. Also available on the Free Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.